The notification sound from Clara's phone cut through the bathroom steam like a blade. She was humming in the shower, completely oblivious, while I sat on our bed folding laundry. The screen lit up on her nightstand. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible. V***. My hand stopped moving. The white cotton shirt I'd been folding hung limp in my grip. 15 years of marriage, and I'd never felt my world tilt quite like this. I didn't rush to her phone. That's not who I am. Julian Blackwell carefully considers his choices. In finance, panic can devastate portfolios. I've built my career on cold calculation, on reading between the lines of quarterly reports and market fluctuations. This was just another data point requiring analysis. The shower kept running. Clara's voice echoed off the tiles as she sang some pop song I didn't recognize. I walked to the nightstand and picked up her phone. No passcode. She had never felt the need for secrets before. The message thread showed 3 weeks of exchanges. Brief, coded, careful. But the pattern was unmistakable. Late-night texts when she claimed to be working. Morning messages that made my stomach twist. V had to be Victor from her marketing firm. I'd met him at the Christmas party. Tall, dark hair, easy smile. The type who probably called women gorgeous without irony. I set the phone back exactly where it was and returned to folding laundry. When Clara emerged wrapped in her towel, hair dripping, I was the picture of domestic normalcy. "Morning, love," she said, kissing my cheek. Her skin smelled like jasmine and betrayal. "Morning," I replied, not looking up from the shirts. "Coffee's ready." She grabbed her phone, scrolled briefly, then tossed it back down. No reaction. Either she was an excellent actress, or she genuinely believed I was too trusting to look. Both possibilities made my jaw clench. Over breakfast, I studied her like a balance sheet. Clara had always been animated, gesturing with her coffee cup as she talked about work. But lately, she'd grown vague about her projects. When I asked about the Henderson campaign she'd been excited about last month, she just shrugged. "Oh, that's on hold," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Boring corporate stuff anyway." But her phone buzzed again, and this time she snatched it up instantly. Her face softened as she read the message, a smile tugging at her lips. "Work?" I asked casually. "Just Sarah being dramatic about some deadline," she said, typing rapidly. Sarah, not Victor. The lie came so easily, I almost admired it. That evening, I found myself in my home office longer than usual. Not because I had extra work, but because I needed space to think. Clara was in the living room, laptop open, supposedly working on presentations. But every few minutes came the telltale ping of notifications, followed by her quiet laughter. I pulled up our credit card statements on my computer. There, 3 weeks ago, a charge at Chez Laurent, the French restaurant downtown, $247. I remembered that night. Clara had called at 6, breathless and apologetic. "Emergency client dinner," she'd said. "You know how it is." "Rain check on our anniversary plans?" Our anniversary. She'd spent our anniversary with Victor at the most romantic restaurant in the city. I leaned back in my chair, fingers steepled. The fury was there, burning in my chest like acid, but I forced it down. Emotion was the enemy of good strategy. I needed facts, not feelings. The next morning, I found the second piece of evidence. Clara was rushing around the bedroom, gathering her things for work. She always moved like a hurricane in the mornings, leaving trails of cosmetics and clothing in her wake. As she grabbed her purse from the dresser, a small velvet box tumbled out. "Oh, damn," she muttered, snatching it up. But I'd seen enough. Cartier. The distinctive red leather and gold script. "What's that?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She froze for just a moment, less than a heartbeat, but I caught it. "Oh, this old thing? Just some earrings Sarah got me for helping with the Morrison project." She stuffed the box back in her purse. You know how she goes overboard with gifts. Sarah again. Sarah, who supposedly couldn't afford to split restaurant bills, according to Clara's previous stories. Sarah, who now apparently bought Cartier jewelry as casual thank you gifts. I nodded and smiled. That's nice of her. After Clara left, I sat in the kitchen drinking coffee that had gone cold. The house felt different now, like a crime scene I was still living in. Every shared memory was contaminated, every I love you retrospectively hollow. But Julian Blackwell didn't build a portfolio worth $8 million by making emotional decisions. I had a cheating wife and a sabotaged marriage. Now I needed a plan. I opened my laptop and started typing notes. Timeline, evidence, patterns. Just like preparing for a hostile takeover, except this time, I was the one being betrayed. By lunch, I had 3 pages of observations and a clear next step. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I'd hoped never to use. Matthews Investigations, answered a gravelly voice. This is Julian Blackwell. I need to verify some suspicions about my wife. Rick Matthews looked exactly like Central Casting's idea of a private investigator. Weathered face, cheap suit, eyes that had seen too much. We met at a diner across town, away from anywhere Clara might spot us. Infidelity cases are my bread and butter, he said, sliding photos across the sticky table. Usually take about 2 weeks to get what you need for court. I studied his previous work. Grainy surveillance photos, time-stamped hotel visits, credit card records. The evidence of other marriages crumbling in real time. I don't want this for court, I told him. I want to know everything. How long, how often, what they're planning. Matthews raised an eyebrow. Planning? People having affairs make plans. New apartments, joint accounts, vacations. I want to know her exit strategy before she knows it herself. He quoted me $5,000. I wrote the check without hesitation. That evening, Clara came home late again. 3rd time this week. Sorry, she said, dropping her purse by the door. Client presentation ran long. She looked flushed, hair slightly mussed. Her lipstick was gone. No problem, I said from the couch. I ordered Thai food. Yours is in the fridge. She kissed the top of my head absently. You're the best. I'm going to shower first. While she was upstairs, I checked her purse. New receipts from places I didn't recognize. A parking stub from the Marriott downtown, and, tucked in the side pocket, a handwritten note on hotel stationery. Room 847, tomorrow at 6. Can't wait. Tomorrow was Thursday. Clara had told me she was working late on Thursday. I photographed the note and put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Upstairs, the shower was still running. Clara was humming again, that same mindless tune that now sounded like nails on a chalkboard. I went to my office and sent the photo to Matthews. His response came back in minutes. Got it. We'll be there tomorrow. Thursday crawled by like a wounded animal. I went through the motions at work. Client calls, market analysis, team meetings. But my mind was in room 847 at the Marriott. By 5 o'clock, I was useless. I told my assistant I was leaving early and drove home. Clara was already gone. A note on the kitchen counter. Working late again. Don't wait up. Love you. The exclamation points felt like mockery. I poured 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my chair, staring out the window. Somewhere across town, my wife was in a hotel room with another man. After 15 years of marriage, I'd become the cliché every man fears. My phone buzzed at 8:30. Matthews. Package delivered. Photos uploading now. I opened my laptop with hands that barely trembled. The photos loaded one by one. Clara entering the hotel lobby at 6:15. Victor arriving 10 minutes later. Both of them in the elevator. A timestamp showed them leaving together at 9:45. The final photo showed them on the sidewalk outside. Victor's hand was on Clara's lower back, possessive and intimate. She was laughing at something he'd said, her face radiant in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in months. I closed the laptop and finished my bourbon. Clara came home at 11:30, reeking of wine and lies. How was work? I asked from the living room. Exhausting, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. The client was impossible. We barely made any progress. She sat on the couch beside me, curling up like she used to when we were young, but now her touch felt like a performance. Julian, she said softly, I've been thinking we should take a vacation. Get away somewhere, just the 2 of us. The guilt vacation. Another cliché. Where did you have in mind? Maybe Europe? Paris has always been on our list. Paris, where Victor had lived before moving here, where Clara's mysterious jewelry had supposedly come from. That sounds wonderful, I lied. We should start planning. She smiled and kissed my cheek. I love you. The words hit me like ice water. Not because they were false, but because they might have been true. Clara could love me and still betray me. People were capable of that kind of compartmentalization. I was learning to be capable of it myself. Over the weekend, I played the perfect husband. We went to brunch, walked through the farmer's market, had dinner with friends. I laughed at Clara's jokes and held her hand and acted like everything was normal. But I was watching. Always watching. Saturday night, she excused herself to take a phone call. "Work emergency," she said, stepping onto the patio. Through the kitchen window, I could see her pacing, animated and smiling. She talked for 20 minutes, occasionally laughing in that breathy way she used to laugh with me. When she came back inside, I was loading the dishwasher. "Everything okay?" "Just Sarah, panicking about Monday's presentation," she said. "You know how she gets." Sarah. Always Sarah. Sunday morning brought another piece of the puzzle. Clara was in the shower when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Victor's full name. Victor Reeves. I let it go to voicemail, then watched Clara's face when she saw the missed call. She disappeared into the bedroom and called him back, speaking in low tones I couldn't make out. When she emerged, she announced she needed to run errands. "On Sunday?" "Just some shopping for the presentation. You know how I am with last-minute details." She was gone for 4 hours. When she returned, she had no shopping bags and couldn't explain where she'd been without stammering. That night, lying in bed beside her, I made my decision. I'd given her every opportunity to come clean, every chance to end this herself and preserve what was left of our marriage. She'd chosen Victor instead. Now it was my turn to choose. Matthews called on Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly projections. "Meet me at the usual place," he said. "I've got everything you need." The diner smelled like grease and broken dreams. Matthews slid a thick manila envelope across the table. "Your wife's been busy," he said. 3 times a week for the past month. Always the same hotel, usually room 847. He must have a corporate rate. I opened the envelope. The photos were devastating and thorough. Clara and Victor entering together, leaving together, kissing in parking lots. Credit card receipts for dinners, gifts, even a weekend in Napa when Clara had told me she was at a work conference. But the worst were the text messages. Matthews had somehow accessed Clara's phone records, and Victor's declarations of love were interspersed with Clara's responses. She called him baby. She told him she'd never felt this way before. She said their future together was worth any pain it might cause. "There's more," Matthews said, sliding across a second folder. "Victor Reeves, 34, divorced 2 years ago. Clean credit, decent job, but here's the interesting part. He's been apartment hunting. The real estate listings showed luxury condos across town, all 2-bedroom units, all within the past 3 weeks. Think they're planning to move in together?" I studied the photos of granite countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows. How much are these places? $4,000 to $5,000 a month, more than he can afford on his salary alone. The implication hung in the air. They weren't just having an affair, they were building a life together, planning an exit strategy that would leave me holding the wreckage. I paid Matthews his final fee and drove home in a haze of rage and calculation. Clara wouldn't be back until evening. Another late work night. Another lie I was supposed to swallow. I spread the photos across my desk like an autopsy report. 15 years of marriage reduced to evidence of betrayal. I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt oddly calm. The uncertainty was over. Now I could act. I started with our finances, joint accounts, investment portfolios, the house deed, everything that tied our lives together legally. I documented every asset, every debt, every dollar that could become a weapon in divorce court. Then I researched Victor Reeves. Social media gave me his life story. College football player turned marketing executive. Recent divorce from his college sweetheart. No kids, no major assets. The kind of man who thought charm could substitute for substance. His company's website showed him smiling at corporate events, usually with a drink in his hand. His LinkedIn profile boasted about innovative solutions and paradigm shifts. Corporate buzzword bingo that told me everything I needed to know about his actual competence. But the most interesting discovery came from his ex-wife's Facebook page. She'd been posting cryptic quotes about liars and men who can't keep their promises. Recent comments from friends suggested Victor had cheated on her too. Clara was dating a serial cheater. The irony would have been funny if it weren't destroying my marriage. At 6 o'clock, I poured myself a scotch and waited. Clara came home at 7:30. Later than usual. Her hair was mussed, her shirt slightly wrinkled. "Sorry," she called from the hallway. "Crazy day at the office." She appeared in my doorway, purse clutched against her chest like armor. Something in my expression must have registered, because she stopped talking. "How was room 847? I asked quietly. The color drained from her face. Her purse slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a thud. "Julian, Sit down." She remained frozen in the doorway. "I can explain." "Sit down." Clara moved to the chair across from my desk like she was walking to her execution. She perched on the edge, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. I opened the manila envelope and began laying photos on the desk between us, one by one, methodically, like dealing cards. Clara and Victor entering the hotel. Clara and Victor kissing in his car. Clara and Victor at dinner while I thought she was working late. With each photo, Clara seemed to shrink smaller. "How long?" I asked. "Julian, please, let me explain." "How long, Clara?" Her voice came out as a whisper. 2 months. I laid out the text messages next. Her declarations of love for another man, printed in black and white. "You told him you'd never felt this way before. Was that true?" Tears started streaming down her face. "I never meant for this to happen." "Answer the question. When you told Victor you'd never felt this way before, were you lying to him or to me?" She covered her face with her hands. I don't know anymore." I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, our neighbors were living their normal lives, cutting grass, walking dogs, believing their spouses when they said they were working late. "Victor's apartment hunting," I said, without turning around. 2-bedroom places, expensive ones. Clara's sharp intake of breath told me she hadn't known. "He hasn't told you about the apartments, has he?" "Hasn't mentioned moving in together?" "No, we haven't talked about—" "Of course you haven't. Because you're not his girlfriend, Clara. You're his midlife crisis, just like his ex-wife was, until he got bored and moved on." I turned around. Clara was sobbing now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Is this how you want to end 15 years?" she asked, with cruelty. I'm not the one who ended it. I gathered up the photos and put them back in the envelope. Clinical. Efficient. Like closing a failed investment. "I've contacted a lawyer," I said. "You should do the same." "Julian, please. We can work through this. Marriage counseling, whatever you want. I want you to pack a bag and stay somewhere else tonight. We'll discuss details tomorrow." She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "You're throwing me out?" "I'm giving you what you want. Freedom to be with Victor without sneaking around. But I don't want. This isn't what I want. Maybe you should have considered that before you crossed the line with him in a hotel room." Clara flinched like I'd slapped her. I'd never spoken to her that way before. But then, she'd never destroyed our marriage before. She left an hour later with a suitcase and red eyes. I watched from the window as she loaded her car, probably calling Victor to explain why she needed somewhere to stay. The house felt different after she left. Quieter. Like a held breath finally released. I poured another scotch and sat in my chair, looking out at the empty driveway. Tomorrow, I would begin dismantling our life together. Tonight, I would mourn what I'd lost. But underneath the grief was something else, something cold and patient and calculating. Clara thought she could have it all. Her stable marriage and her exciting affair. Her security and her passion. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Victor Reeves worked at Pinnacle Marketing, a mid-tier firm that handled corporate accounts. I'd never dealt with them professionally, but in my world, everyone was connected by no more than 2 degrees of separation. It took 3 phone calls to find someone who knew someone who could tell me about Pinnacle's internal politics. "Victor's decent enough," said Tom Bradley, a client who'd worked with Pinnacle last year. "Bit of a showboat, but he brings in business." "Why?" "Just curious about their capabilities. We might need marketing support next quarter." "I'd recommend Sarah Chen instead. She's their real talent. Victor's more style than substance, if you know what I mean." Sarah Chen, Clara's supposed best friend, the one who allegedly bought Cartier jewelry and called about work emergencies. I wondered if Sarah knew about the affair, or if she was just another lie in Clara's expanding web of deception. 2 days after Clara moved out, I got my first chance to test Victor's character. I'd learned his routine from the surveillance photos. Every morning at 7:15, he stopped at the Starbucks on 5th Street before work. Regular as clockwork, predictable as a quarterly earnings report. I was waiting in line behind him when he ordered his usual, venti caramel macchiato with extra foam. When he reached for his wallet, I stepped forward. "I've got it," I told the barista, "and a black coffee for me." Victor turned, surprised. "Thanks, but you don't have to—" "Julian Blackwell," I said, extending my hand. "I think we met at my wife's Christmas party. You work with Clara." Recognition flickered across his face. He shook my hand, but his grip was weak, uncertain. "Right, yes. Victor Reeves, nice to see you again." We collected our drinks and moved away from the counter. Victor was already edging toward the door, but I blocked his path casually. "Clara mentioned you've been working together on some big project." "The Henderson campaign?" His face went blank. "Henderson? Or was it Morrison? I get them confused. You know how it is. She comes home so excited about work, talking about deadlines and client dinners." Victor's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "Yeah, we've been busy lately. She works so hard. Sometimes she doesn't get home until midnight. I keep telling her she needs to find better work-life balance. But you know Clara. Once she commits to something, she gives it everything." The color was draining from Victor's face. He understood exactly what I was telling him. "I should get to work," he stammered. "Of course. Nice seeing you again, Victor. Give my regards to Sarah Chen when you see her." I watched him hurry to his car through the coffee shop window. His hands were shaking as he started the engine. Phase 1 complete. That afternoon I called my lawyer. David Morrison, no relation to any marketing campaign, was a shark in an expensive suit. We'd used him for corporate acquisitions, and I knew he specialized in protecting assets during hostile situations. "Divorce law isn't my usual area," he admitted when I explained the situation, "but asset protection, that's my wheelhouse." He outlined my options with clinical precision. Since Clara had committed adultery, I had grounds for an at-fault divorce in our state. The prenup we'd signed would protect most of my premarital assets, but our joint property was still vulnerable. "The key is documentation," David said. "Every shared expense, every joint decision, every dollar she's spent on this affair. If we can prove she's been using marital funds to support the relationship." I showed him the credit card statements I'd copied. Expensive dinners, hotel rooms, gifts, all charged to our joint account. Clara had been financing her betrayal with our money. "This is good," David said. "Very good. She's violated the financial provisions of your prenup by using joint funds for personal relationships outside the marriage." By the time I left David's office, I had a strategy. Clara would get exactly what she deserved, and not a penny more. The next week brought an unexpected gift. I was reviewing my email when I found a message forwarded from my assistant. Someone at Pinnacle Marketing had reached out about potential consulting opportunities. They wanted to discuss a project that required financial expertise and discretion. The sender was Sarah Chen. I called back within an hour. "Mr. Blackwell? Thank you for responding so quickly. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I got your name from Clara, actually." "Interesting. What can I do for you?" "We have a client situation that requires some financial analysis. Corporate restructuring, potential fraud issues. Clara mentioned you specialize in forensic accounting?" I didn't, but I wasn't about to correct her. "What kind of timeline are we looking at?" "Soon. There are some irregularities in one of our accounts that need immediate attention. I'd prefer to discuss the details in person, if possible." We arranged to meet the next day at a restaurant downtown. Sarah Chen turned out to be nothing like Clara had described. No nonsense, sharply dressed, clearly competent. The exact opposite of someone who would buy impulsive jewelry or make dramatic late-night phone calls. "I'll be direct," she said after we'd ordered. "Someone in our office has been charging personal expenses to client accounts. Small amounts, but consistent over several months." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were credit card statements and expense reports, all bearing Victor Reeves' signature. "Company policy is clear about personal use of corporate cards," Sarah continued. "But since he's been bringing in good business, management has looked the other way. Until now." I studied the documents. Hotel charges, restaurant bills, even jewelry purchases, all on dates that matched Clara's affair timeline. Victor had been using company money to wine and dine my wife. "What kind of consulting are you looking for?" I asked. "Advice on how to handle this internally. HR wants to avoid a scandal, but the amounts are getting larger. We need someone external to review the situation and recommend next steps. I quoted her a consulting fee that was barely more than my hourly rate. Sarah accepted immediately. "There's one other thing," she said as we prepared to leave. "Clara's been distracted lately. Missing deadlines, skipping meetings. I know you two are having some personal issues." My expression must have revealed something because Sarah leaned forward. "She's my friend, Mr. Blackwell, but friendship doesn't excuse unprofessional behavior. If she can't separate her personal life from work, it's going to become a problem." I smiled. "I'm sure Clara will figure out her priorities soon enough." 2 days later, I delivered my report to Sarah. It recommended a full audit of Victor's expenses and immediate suspension pending investigation. I also noted several violations of corporate policy that could result in termination. Sarah called that afternoon to thank me. This is exactly what we needed. Professional, thorough, and completely justified if we need to defend our decision. Decision? Victor's being terminated tomorrow. Too many policy violations, too much risk to the company. We can't afford to keep someone who treats corporate funds like his personal piggy bank. I hung up and poured myself a celebratory scotch. Victor Reeves had just learned an expensive lesson about using other people's money to finance his affairs. That evening, Clara called for the first time since moving out. "Julian, we need to talk." "About what?" "About us. About our marriage. About fixing this." She sounded desperate, frantic. I wondered if Victor had told her about losing his job, or if she'd figured it out herself. "I think we've said everything we need to say. Please, just meet me for coffee. One conversation. If you still want to proceed with the divorce after that, I won't fight you." I almost said no, but curiosity won over caution. "Fine. Tomorrow at 10. The place on 5th Street. The same Starbucks where I'd bought Victor his last caramel macchiato as an employed man." "Thank you," Clara whispered. "Thank you for giving us a chance." But she was wrong. I wasn't giving us a chance. I was giving her enough rope to hang herself. Clara was already waiting when I arrived at Starbucks. She looked terrible. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under her eyes, clothes that hung loose on her shrinking frame. The woman who'd glowed with secret happiness just 2 weeks ago now looked like a ghost of herself. She had chosen the corner table, away from the morning crowd. 2 cups sat in front of her. Black coffee for me, some sugary concoction for herself that remained untouched. "You look good," she said, as I sat down. "Rested." I did look good. Better than I had in months. Amazing what removing a source of stress could do for a man's health. "What did you want to discuss?" Clara wrapped her hands around her cup like it was anchoring her to the earth. "I made a terrible mistake, the worst mistake of my life." "Okay." She'd clearly expected more reaction. When none came, she pressed on. "I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed everything we built together. But Julian, I'm asking you to consider counseling, to consider giving us another chance." "Why?" The simple question seemed to break something inside her. Tears started flowing down her cheeks. "Because I love you. Because 15 years has to count for something. Because I threw away the best thing in my life for a fantasy that was never real." "What happened to Victor?" Clara's face crumpled. It's over between us. Completely over." "Why?" She wiped her nose with a paper napkin. "He lost his job. Some audit found irregularities in his expense account, and when that happened, he just disappeared. Won't return my calls, won't see me, like our entire relationship meant nothing." I sipped my coffee and waited. "I was so stupid," she continued. "I thought he loved me. I thought we had something special. But the moment things got difficult, he vanished, like I was just a temporary distraction." "Maybe you were." Clara flinched. "I deserved that." "Yes, you did." We sat in silence for a moment. Around us, normal people were starting their normal days, buying coffee before work, checking phones, living lives uncomplicated by betrayal. "I know you hired a private investigator," Clara said suddenly. I raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" "The photos, the timeline, it was too detailed to be coincidence. You had me followed." And I understand why. I understand that you needed proof, needed to protect yourself. I probably would have done the same thing. Probably. Even now, she couldn't commit to honesty. "What I don't understand," she continued, "is why you're being so cruel about it. The man I married wouldn't destroy someone out of spite. The woman I married would never betray our trust with a coworker." Clara recoiled like I'd struck her. "I deserve that too. But Julian, this isn't you. This cold, calculating revenge, it's not who you are." I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. She genuinely believed what she was saying. After everything she'd done, Clara still thought she knew who I was. "You're right," I said finally. "The old Julian wouldn't have done this. The old Julian trusted his wife. The old Julian believed that 15 years of marriage meant something. It does mean something. The old Julian," I continued, "was weak. He ignored warning signs because confronting them would be uncomfortable. He accepted lies because the truth would require difficult decisions." Clara was staring at me like I was a stranger. "But that Julian died in room 847 of the Marriott Hotel. What you're looking at now is what's left." I stood up and put on my coat. Clara reached out, grabbing my wrist. "Please," she whispered, "don't end 15 years like this. Don't let bitterness turn you into someone you're not." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "I'm not bitter, Clara. I'm free." Her face crumpled completely. "I'm pregnant." The words hit the coffee shop like a gunshot. Conversations stopped. People turned to stare. Clara had spoken loud enough for half the place to hear. I sat back down. "When?" 6 weeks. Her voice was barely audible now. "I just found out yesterday." I did the math quickly. 6 weeks ago, Clara was deep into her affair with Victor. The timing was convenient, but not impossible. "Is it mine?" The question hung in the air between us like a blade. Clara's face went white. "Of course it's yours. How can you even ask that? Because 6 weeks ago, you were sleeping with 2 men. Because you've been lying to me for months. Because trust, once broken, doesn't magically repair itself." Other customers were definitely listening now. Clara seemed to realize this and lowered her voice. "I know the timing looks bad, but Julian, I swear to you, this baby is yours. Prove it." "What?" "Paternity test. Today. We'll go to a clinic right now and settle this scientifically." Clara's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You want me to take a paternity test while I'm pregnant? It's completely safe, non-invasive, and simple. I can't believe you're asking me to do this. I can't believe you're surprised that I'm asking." We stared at each other across the small table. Around us, the normal morning rush continued, but we were locked in our own bubble of broken trust and desperate manipulation. "Fine," Clara said finally. "Fine. We'll do the test. But when it proves this baby is yours, I want you to consider counseling. I want you to try to forgive me. If the baby is mine, we'll discuss our options." Our options? Custody arrangements, support payments, visitation schedules. Clara's face went pale. "You'd still divorce me? Even if I'm carrying your child?" "Being pregnant doesn't erase adultery, Clara. It just makes the logistics more complicated." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Maybe she was. Maybe the woman who'd married a trusting man was finally meeting the stranger she'd created through her betrayal. "I don't know who you are anymore," she whispered. "I'm the man who learned what his marriage was really worth." I stood up again and left money on the table for both coffees. Clara remained seated, staring into her untouched drink like it might contain answers. "Call me when you're ready to take the test," I said. "Until then, my lawyer will handle any communication." I walked out into the bright morning sunshine. Behind me, through the coffee shop window, I could see Clara still sitting at our table, alone and crying. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from David Morrison. "Divorce papers ready for filing. Just need your approval to proceed." I typed back, "File them." 3 months later, the paternity test results arrived in my lawyer's office. As I'd suspected, the baby wasn't mine. Clara's desperate last gambit had failed spectacularly, and she'd been forced to inform Victor Reeves that he was about to become a father. According to Sarah Chen, who'd become an unexpected ally, Victor's response had been predictable. He'd demanded his own paternity test, then disappeared when it confirmed what Clara already knew. Last anyone heard, He'd moved back to California, leaving Clara to face single motherhood alone. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning in November. Clara didn't contest anything. She couldn't afford to, having lost her job at Pinnacle after missing too many deadlines during her emotional breakdown. I kept the house, most of our investments, and my dignity. She kept her mistakes and their consequences. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office when Sarah Chen called with an update I hadn't requested but found oddly satisfying. "Thought you might want to know," she said. "Clara applied for a position here last week." And we turned her down. Her references from her previous job were mixed. Apparently, she had some personal issues that affected her professional performance. I didn't respond immediately. Clara was struggling to rebuild her life while carrying Victor's child, unable to find work in her field, probably living off credit cards and savings that wouldn't last much longer. "That must be difficult for her," I said finally. "Probably. But companies can't afford to hire people with reliability issues, especially in client-facing roles." After hanging up, I sat in my chair looking out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Clara was learning that actions have consequences that extend far beyond the moment of decision. That betraying someone's trust doesn't just end a relationship. It destroys your credibility in ways that follow you into every future interaction. Victor had learned the same lesson when his expense account fraud made him unemployable at any reputable firm. Word travels fast in professional circles, and the man who thought charm could replace integrity was discovering how wrong he'd been. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt nothing at all. That evening, I drove past our old neighborhood on my way home from a client dinner. The house Clara and I had shared for 8 years now belonged solely to me, but I rarely went there anymore. Too many memories, too much history embedded in every room. As I turned onto Maple Street, I saw a moving truck parked outside the Henderson place. New neighbors, starting fresh in a house full of possibility and promise. I wondered if they were newlyweds, full of hope and trust, believing their love could survive anything life threw at them. I hoped they were right. But I knew better now. At the red light on 5th Street, I glanced toward the apartment complex where Clara was living. Had to be, based on the address David had gotten for the divorce papers. A modest place. Nothing like the luxury condos she and Victor had browsed together. Reality had a way of adjusting expectations downward. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Julian, this is Clara. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know the baby was born yesterday. A girl. She's healthy. I named her Emma. I thought you should know. I'm sorry for everything." I read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. Clara's daughter wasn't my responsibility or my concern. She belonged to a life I'd systematically dismantled and walked away from. But as I drove toward my new apartment downtown, a clean, modern space with no history and no ghosts, I found myself thinking about the name Emma. It had been on our list years ago, when we'd talked about having children someday, before Clara chose Victor over our future, before she traded 15 years of marriage for 2 months of excitement, before she learned that some decisions can't be undone, no matter how much you regret them afterward. I parked in my building's garage and took the elevator to the 15th floor. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it, pristine, organized, empty of everything except the essential furniture and my work. No photos, no mementos, no reminders of the life I'd lost and the man I used to be. I poured myself a scotch and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city lights. 15 stories below, people were living their lives, making choices, trusting the wrong people, believing promises that would be broken. Some of them were probably cheating on their spouses right now. Others were being cheated on, too trusting or too naive to see the signs. And a few, like me, had moved beyond both categories into something colder and cleaner. My reflection stared back from the darkened glass, a man who'd learned to protect himself by feeling nothing at all. Clara had created this version of Julian Blackwell through her betrayal. Victor had refined him through his cowardice, and now they were both gone, erased from my life as completely as bad investments purged from a portfolio. I finished my scotch and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new reasons to stay sharp and calculating. The old Julian, the trusting one, the vulnerable one, was buried so deep he might never surface again. Clara had wanted to know who I'd become. Now she knew. I was the man who survived her betrayal by becoming someone she could never hurt again.